So Kalyan, I really appreciate you taking the time this morning to share Keysight's perspective on Open RAN with me. And first and foremost, I'm curious to get your perspective on whether the O-RAN specifications coming out of the O-RAN Alliance are at the point today where vendors can really fully implement disaggregated components.
Yes, so vendors are implementing from the specifications. The specifications themselves are a little bit open. There are things left to interpretation that the vendors choose a certain path. And what we have found based on our testing with several of these vendors is there are some interoperability challenges because they chose a certain path. So the specs are tightening up, but at this point, there's still things left for interpretation.
Yeah, we've got these kind of dual but very much overlapping paths around virtualization and then virtualization and open and interoperable. So I'm just curious if you can expound on some of those challenges that we'll see in making all of these discrete O-RAN components work together.
Yes, so that takes it to the next level of challenge. First thing is to make these discrete components work with each other on specific hardware, then making it work on a virtualized platform that their customer chooses has been a different challenge that we have seen. We have seen instances where it would work perfectly when these two components are put together in their environments. But when you take it to a virtualized environment, now you're talking about how much compute power, how much memory, and so on and so forth that are required to make it happen. So it adds another level of complexity, and that's one of the things that the different vendors are challenged with today.
And then, we've got virtualization, and then the next step beyond that would be cloud native. So maybe you can give me a little reality check here. When do you think we will realistically see cloud-based Open RAN deployments?
It's a little bit ways off. I think a lot of vendors, they do interchange the virtualized and cloud native quite frequently. And the cloud native poses a different set of challenges. To me, you are cloud native when you're really starting to build your products as microservices that can be hosted on public or private clouds. There are the vendors that are really public cloud vendors that are going after this market. We see that. And many of them are partnering with these vendors as well. We see some of the components are not really cloud native, but can be hosted on the cloud. So in order to make it truly cloud native, it's going to take a bit longer. I would say it's at least a year out when you start seeing some of this come into play.
And so one thing, that's come up in a lot of my Open RAN discussions is this need for just broad collaboration among lots of different stakeholders. And I'm curious what that means for a company like Keysight when you just really kind of ramp up the complexity of going from a maybe single vendor RAN to a just multi-vendor with a lot of different configuration and component scenarios.
Yes, so the challenges are there, and that's where Keysight really comes in and helps, right? For example, you're now talking about in the past you would have the big Ericsson or Nokia, Samsung come in with a monolithic G Node B. Now this is broken into several different components. You're talking about the radios coming from a different vendor, the DUs coming from a different vendor, and even within the DU, it's kind of hosted on a virtual environment. So you have opportunity for infrastructure providers to come in there. You have GPU vendors coming in. So the ecosystem has expanded quite a bit. And that poses a challenge for many, including the operators, MNOs that are trying to put all this together. Because remember, now they are choosing who they go with for each of these discrete components. So that's where Keysight comes into play. We help a lot in terms of how interoperable these are. We are also coming up with conformance packages to make sure these discrete components can work with each other. So two separate areas there. One is interop, a huge challenge, as well as are you now conforming to the spec? And as the specs themselves are evolving, that's yet another challenge. Both places Keysight helps.
Yeah, it's hard to hit a moving target, but Kalyan, I really appreciate you taking the time to speak with me today, and I look forward to getting more perspective from Keysight October 13th at the Open RAN Forum. If you haven't registered yet, you can visit openranforum.com and get that done. It's going to be a really good program, and we've got a lot of really good, diverse perspectives on what is a very interesting, very fast-moving subject, so please join us for that.